Hello and welcome to Fire in the Belly. Today we have myself, Mighty Pete, and we have the John Lefebvre. Good afternoon, good evening to you, sir. Good afternoon, I should say.
Yes, thank you very much. We are about a half a world away from each other, aren't we?
what's about a few miles and a sort of a fair bit of water in between us, but
it's astonishing, isn't it, that this can be so instantaneous? It's just, man, that shows how old I am. It just still knocks me out that we can do this.
I think it's amazing to the whole world. But listen, it goes to show we're all connected in some ways and shapes and forms anyway, isn't it? But anyway, John, tell us, who are you, what do you do, and where are you from?
I'm, I was raised an altar boy, a Catholic in Calgary, Alberta, by my Irish mom, and my French Canadian father died when I was about 3. So I was raised by a single mom. I was fortunate to be born in extreme privilege, and what I mean by that is in Canada at all. We are all extremely privileged compared to about 80% of the world, and my mom helped me appreciate that and take full advantage of it. I was encouraged to get educated and whatnot. I took a fairly important side trip when I was around 17 or so, when I decided that LSD and Jefferson Airplane were more important than a lot of other things that I was being forced to learn in those days. And so that was very formative for me. I think I learned the most important things I learned in my life when I was around 17. It's been taking me, I'm 70 now, and I'm going to say it's taken me 75 years to learn how to live up to those things that I learned when I was 17. So it's an ongoing thing. But I was out in the world. I was busted when I was 17, actually, for selling LSD to cops that were dressed up like hippies. And that prepared me well for something that occurred to me later on in my life.
That's not fair, really, is it?
Well, it may not be fair, but you can't say I didn't have fair warning. So that part of it was fair. I went to university. I became a lawyer, practiced law for about 13 or 14 years. And I met my friend Steve Lawrence, was a client. And he came up with this idea about, if somebody brought some professionalism, responsibility, reliability to the money transfer side of online gaming, that might be a good little business model. And he asked me if I'd like to husband that along with him. So I did. And we began the business in 2000. Never spent a dime on advertising, went public on the London Stock Exchange in 2003 and achieved the market cap of around $2 billion, 2 billion American dollars. I had 27% of that at one point. And then Uncle Sam put up his hand. We were all arrested and charged. I was charged with 3 20-year offenses, racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy. We eventually, over a 5 or 6 year out on bail period, we wound up negotiating. I pled guilty to a lesser offense, conspiracy to promote illegal gambling, which was a maximum 5-year offense. I wound up getting 45 days, but between me and my partner and my company, we forfeited $240 million. Which was certainly not all that I had ever taken off the table, but it was a sizable sum of it. But on that same night when we were arrested, my net worth went from high 300 millions down to around well, I went from fabulous wealth to mere wealth. And so the rich guys can't really pull the wool over my eyes. I know what's up with those guys because I'm one of them. And I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about that, what fortune means and what it's for, and what does it come with responsibilities. And of course, what I came up with was that, of course, it does. And we'll get into that a lot more before we're done here too. But I achieved notice, I think, Pete, for all of that. That whole story is quite spectacular in a way, isn't it? But it's not the most important thing that ever happened to me, and I hope we can talk about that again too. But the thing that maybe in my community got the most notice was the fact that, well, when I was being sentenced in Manhattan, and I got the forfeiture and the notice of going to jail for 45 days, one of the things my lawyer was able to say to His Honor was that I had, at that time, it was in 2010, I think, that I was able to, he was able to boast on my behalf that I had given away well more than $50 million to different people and different organizations. And so, and that was one of the things that kind of spurred me on. I was a hippie, when I was a kid, and I thought, that here's an opportunity for me to put, my money where my mouth is, and not just talk, but demonstrate what I think responsibility with wealth is about. I think that we, if my basic idea of on a personal level, if I don't share enough of it, I don't deserve any of it, right? But I think we have, there's the other level too. There's the public level, and that is, I'm sorry, that was private. But on the public level, I think we have public responsibilities that are joint responsibilities. Like where we started out, we're super privileged in our Western society that we take for granted, and most of the things that we take for granted in it, first of all, we take them for granted, but second of all, actually, I think we should. Maybe what I'll do is I'll just take a moment and tell you what I think those things are, because they're kind of central to my story.
Yeah, please.
In our privileged society, there are a number of things that they're really basically what they are the elements of freedom, the practical elements of freedom. Respect and integrity of the person, security and integrity of the person, reasonable access to food, clothing, and shelter, access to the tools of self-improvement, education, access to the tools of health, medicine, access to basic finance, access to justice, and finally, last but certainly not least, access to a healthy environment. And I've taken those 7 things and I call them, in my book, they're called universal rights, because I think that we feel entitled to those without even acknowledging them really in our free society, but they are basic things that if any one of them were taken away from us, we'd be going, hey, wait a minute, what do you mean I can't get a credit card? Or, what do you mean I can't get a lawyer to defend me on that dope charge, right? Or whatever. And you know what? Actually, I think we should take them for granted, because I think they are fundamental rights. We used to call them human rights, but I don't like to call them human rights because, Pete, we don't have the creds. We don't have the right, we haven't earned the right to call them human rights until we accord them to all humans, right? And until we accord them to all humans, those rights are more like country club rights, because we're in the country club where they get them and everybody else isn't. And, I can't help it if I'm lucky. Doesn't really explain the difference. When I look at human beings, I tried to distinguish when I was going through this, analysis, what distinguished us from, the people starving in the deserts of Somalia, that we were entitled to those things. So if we're entitled to them, why aren't they? And there really isn't anything to distinguish us. And the only thing I could come up with is their basic rights, and we are all entitled to them. One of the ways I kind of sum up my attitudes about wealth is that, if we're happy with if we're happy with the benefits that freedom has dumped in our lap, but are careless about what others who are less fortunate in the freedom department must endure, then we haven't earned those freedoms. We haven't earned those rights. We've just taken liberties. We haven't earned freedom. We've just taken liberties. So, and that's basically my central thesis, is that because we are so fortunate, we have a responsibility to help all others of our species to develop their human resource as well, as much as we can, and then set them free to look after themselves. That's what we have to do. And that has lots of very, very interesting implications.
Do you think people get it? Because, it's a slight biological lottery, right? Where you're potentially born, depending on your background, your beliefs and all the rest. That,
But
sometimes it takes the contrast to actually be able to see your own reflection, the depth of the situation.
We went to India when I was, I don't know, younger. My partner at the time, Jane, and we met a guy from Switzerland who was a beautiful guy. He's, he was older then. He was like 45. I'm 70 now. But he said something that I thought that stuck with me. And he said there are two ways to get rich in this world. One is to get rich, and the other was to spend 2 nights in India.
Is that a threat or a promise?
Yes. And so I've had that sensibility, I understood that intellectually and probably even spiritually, long before I came to this ridiculous wealth. But when I did come to it, those are the sorts of principles that I began to, toss around and try to understand better. We are super wealthy, and that in its very in itself it creates the responsibility that we have to help others who are less fortunate that way.
In defining wealth now, I mean, what is your definition? I mean, considering that you've seen extreme wealth, you've experienced that, but has your definition of wealth changed?
Well, it has, Pete, but when I use wealth in that sense, I'm talking about the common, material wealth that, people, the way people generally use the word now. Of course, my book starts out by saying that, although I achieved fabulous wealth, the most important thing that ever fell in my lap fell in mine no more than it has in everybody's. And that's the other wealth you're talking about, and that is consciousness. That's just being awareness, being a conscious being in the universe. We are the universe's vessels of consciousness. Here's a funny way to look at that. If it weren't for us, the universe would be an extremely astonishing place for nobody. We are the universe's vessels of consciousness. That makes us the universe's vessels of astonishment as well, and of love. We're the universe's vessels of appreciation. We're the way that the universe appreciates itself. That's what we are. We are very, very, very special beings, all of us. We are the universe's vessels of love. If it wasn't for us, who would the universe be special for?
What does love mean to you, John?
It's that, profoundly deep-seated attraction that we have, a sensitivity to others, a sensibility for others, that it's the thing that makes us feel so profoundly rewarded when we do something that's generous and we experience gratitude back. Love is an appreciation that the things that we care about most in ourselves exist equally in all others as well. And, it's being able to share that openly is the act of love, and being able to appreciate that is the awareness of it. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it's what came to mind when you asked the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it answers on some more. And what is awareness for you?
Well, it's this capability that we have, it's just like the ability to dream dreams and then make them come real. It's the ability to watch what goes on in our world, assess it, analyze it, figure it out, appreciate it, be astonished by it, be reviled by it, it's kind of, consciousness in a way is sort of like computing power. We have this thing in our society now. We think of ourselves as the sum of our experiences, or the sum of our knowledge. But Pete, knowledge and experience are kind of like data and code. They're useless without computing power, right? So, and all the data and code, all the data and code, all the experience and knowledge in the world is completely useless, utterly useless, without that computing power that we call consciousness. So I don't think we should identify with our capacity to be aware.
Yeah. I love that definition. I mean, I think that's because it's perspective, right? Because I do say to people is that you can change your past, you know, and I mean that there's I can't remember who said it, but you know, there's an expression more or less. So many people live their past in their future, and yet, you know, if they live their future now, the world will be in a much more beautiful place. You know, it's like you know, to live in your possibilities as opposed to living your anxieties. It would be, you know, where could we be? You know, so many opportunities there, but that's about awareness, right? It's about being conscious, being full of love, and being full of hope, opportunity. It's a different thing.
From this day forward, Pete, I don't know who said it, but for me, it's always going to be Mighty Pete who said that.
I'm claiming it. I'm claiming it. No, but it is. It's for you. I mean, how close do you think you are to being your true self?
Well, occasionally I am. You know, it comes to us all in fits and starts, and you know, there's this elusive thing people call enlightenment, you know, as if it's and we think of it as something that's virtually impossible to achieve, and you know, only 2 guys in history ever did, or you know, maybe 15 or something like that. You know, these guys that you know, and you know what I just read this book called Overstory. That's just a wonderful, wonderful book. And there's an old Chinese guy in it, and he's got these pictures of 15 wise old. They happen to be men, and his granddaughter asked him, "Who are those guys?" And he said, "These are ones who passed the final test." So, I think my real self, you know, with a small s, you know, my ego, you know, kind of like my, you know, the person that in me, if I define myself by my experience and my knowledge, you know, that person, you know, the ego, I'm coming closer and closer to that by understanding what it is and what it isn't. And I shared something I read recently that was really telling to me was you know, it was, you know, on Facebook, so I didn't take a note of it, but it was how did it go? It was like we spent our whole life searching for our true self, and when we get to the end of our life, we find out that, you know, we were spent searching for something that doesn't exist, because there isn't really a true self. What in my vision of consciousness, what it is, and I have no way of proving this, but I think it, and I think it's right, so I say it anyways. Okay.
That's the caveat.
Our consciousness is exactly the same thing. And I'm not talking about 2 nails that are exactly the same shape. I'm talking about the same nail. Our consciousness, and we tend to experience it as individuals. We individuate it because we think of ourselves as individual beings, and you know, but you know, I know I'm going way over the top here. You know, my journalist friend says, "John, you're going to be losing them." But I think that that capability of being aware, of being, you know, the universe's vessels of awareness, that thing is we are all the same thing. One of the things I talk about in my book, the analogy I use is wells. You know, we think of ourselves as, you know, even when I say we're vessels of knowledge, of vessels of consciousness, that's speaking of the vessel, but really we aren't the vessel, we're the consciousness, right? Wells fill up with water, you know, the water, but the well doesn't own the water. The well didn't create the water. After the well crumbles, the water still exists. That's consciousness. And it is the same in absolutely all of us. One of the things I like to tell people, Pete, is that, you and I and, the starving lady on the desert in Sudan, whose baby is dying at her dusty breast that yields nothing but, dying whimpers. The breast yields nothing. But, we all have the same thing in us. We have the same capacity to dream and the same capacity to be disappointed. And we are all that. But we distinguish ourselves in this illusion that we are somehow, I don't know, special, or another way of saying it is like, I'm lucky. I can't help it. It's not my fault. I'm on the lucky side of the lottery, as you put it. Well, it becomes our fault when we don't realize that luck comes at a cost. It's like the cost of freedom. There's a cost of freedom. Everybody agrees there's a cost of freedom. Ever since we were a kid, we were taught that, freedom comes at a cost. Freedom comes at the cost of, we used to think it was, the cost of giving our lives in wars, fighting for freedom, and that's part of the cost. But it didn't make sense to me that was the whole picture, because, first of all, I don't know what the number is, but is it 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 400,000 of us ever pay that price, and all the rest of us get it for free? And that just, sort of didn't seem right to me. But, to me, and what I thought, what I came up with was this. I think the true cost of freedom is the responsibility, the duty to strive in every day that we are free to assure that everybody else is on a track whereby soon what we take for granted, they will be able to take for granted too. So the way we pay for our freedom, the way we earn our freedom, is to acknowledge that we have a duty to strive every day, any way we can, to make sure that those who are less fortunate achieve that fundamental, entitlement too.
It's all perspective though too, isn't it?
I think I know what you mean, but can you just phrase that to me in a different way?
Yeah, well, that's what. Because who's to say that? I mean, that mother that you talked about in Somalia. I mean, she could be more aware than all of us put together, potentially.
Oh, indeed. 10,000 years ago, she was. We're actually more distracted than we are aware now. We use our consciousness in our society for it's almost silly, the things that we use it on. We spend all day with these thoughts drifting in and out of our minds, and we honor them immediately by paying attention to them. But many of them aren't worth it. Bill's coming over for supper on Sunday. He's a vegan, and I got to get some goddamn vegetables. And I forgot to give my lawyer that receipt for my income tax. And I've got a meeting tomorrow morning with Mighty Joe. Geez, I can't drink tonight because I got a meeting with Mighty Pete tomorrow morning. And all these thoughts come back and forth in our minds all day long, and we permit them to take our attention. And on another podcast, I met a guy who talked about the skilled management of attention, and what I think I mean something different than he does. But one of the things, let me start this part of the conversation here. That part of us that dreams at night doesn't go to sleep when we wake up, but it cries at what we use it for in the daytime. Oh God, my toe hurts. These shoes are just not right. And I'm getting so sick of this Chevrolet. I really got to get a BMW and all these things, and what I encourage people to do, to get beyond that somehow, is to take, to take just half an hour in the day and treat those things that come through our mind, treat them as what they are. And in my mind, what they are is they're, friends who drop by without an invitation. They're like clients without an appointment, right? And when that happens, we can say, okay, just not now. Most of those things that I talk about that clutter up our minds are matters of responsibility. We have to look after ourselves. We have to look after our families. We have to pay our taxes. We have to make all the arrangements to do those things. We do have to do those things, and they're responsibility. But what I don't buy is that because they pop into our head, we have to pay attention to them now. And what I want people to do is take a half an hour every day and just let that part of us that dreams at night be awake with us. Just be quiet, sit still. Do not admit the clients without an appointment, and see what magical things come up. And every time we do that, Pete, something wonderful occurs to us, a solution to some, or a new understanding, or something marvelous, we don't have to remember too many of our dreams to appreciate it's almost infinitely creative, that part of us that dreams, in such astonishing detail and poetry, meanings, deep meaning, and these things, right? This thing does not go asleep when we're awake. If we can just shut the fuck up for half an hour, and let that be, wonderful things happen. One of them is, we love our half an hour. And another one is that we begin to get an appreciation for what an astonishing thing we are. And we begin to appreciate that we human beings are all the same. We are all just as precious as we think we are to ourselves. We are all that precious. So, and I guess some people call that meditating. It might be something like a meditation, but
yeah, I mean, is it visualization, meditation? What is it, do you think?
It is. I think it's just setting that part of us that ordinarily we allow to be distracted on petty things, just setting it free. It's what's that thing the Zen guys always talk about? Master, what shall I do to become enlightened? Chop wood and draw water. And Pete, and I know that some of the most astonishing things that come to us while we're chopping wood or whatever, walking in the forest, when we're, cleaning the mud off our shoes. It's just, doing the things we do, but
it's the unconscious tasks, right? We sort of become consciously distracted by, as you say, scrubbing your boots or jumping in the shower, that actually the unconscious mind says, my turn. I have something to say.
Exactly right. See, here's a moment of enlightenment.
The least time you expect is because you weren't getting in the way. Congratulations for getting the hell out of your own way.
It's a drunkard's dream. It's easier than falling off a log. All you have to do is just nothing. Sweet fuck all.
Today's task, yeah. Why not, right? It's where's your points of insight, enlightenment? Where do you tend to go to reflect or to connect?
Are you talking about like geographically, or you spirit, or in my mind?
Well, I'm curious now. Both.
You know what? I'm actually everywhere, nowhere special. There's a waterfall over there. It's a spectacular waterfall that only comes when we have heavy rain. But I've spent many, many hours just standing at the bottom of that, leaning on a stick and watching the water go. And that's, those are some of my most profoundly wonderful experiences, it used to be, smoking cigarettes used to do it for me, because, what are you doing? Well, I'm having a smoke, which is as much as saying I'm not doing anything. I've repented myself of cigarette smoking, so I had to come up with other things. But I think we can come to that point where we practice skilled management of attention, at every stop sign. Well, and as far as that goes, at every go sign too. It can be just about any time. It's sort of like the chop wood, draw water thing encourages us to not think that just because we're chopping wood and drawing water, that doesn't mean we're not going to have a satori.
It's true, just to be
in that very moment. They could sneak up on you, and they do, these things. And I think, it gets it gets a lot more esoteric than that if you keep pressing me. But there is magic within us, and I don't think it's limited by what we call our time on Earth. I think, and that's that's one of the other things that I can't prove. But consciousness in the universe will exist as long as there are beings like us in the universe, right? And we, that consciousness that is exactly the same in me as it is in you and that lady in Somalia is exactly the same as that guy, 18 million light years away in another galaxy. It's all the same thing. Buddha wouldn't be more conscious if he meditated for another million years, right? So consciousness is ageless, and it's like, I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure people were hip to this a long time before we even knew what coal was. Have you seen this book? It's called The Immortality Key. It's a beautiful story about how this experience that we consider to be the mystical experience that so many of our gurus have seemed to I don't know. Yeah, it is. As soon as I thought of that word, I thought it was the wrong one. So it seems evident that they've experienced it, but they don't really talk about it very much. But anyways, this book, the guy's name is Brian Mirarescu. He's a classicist himself, and like my daughter, and he studied all of the ancient classic stuff, the Greek and that, and a bunch of other history. And he's come to a very interesting conclusion, and that is that the when we have bread and wine when we go to Catholic Mass, or like any Christian celebration, right? He thinks that bread and wine, he calls it the placebo Eucharist, because he thinks historically what those guys were doing, the ancients were using beer, and the less ancient, like the Greeks, were using wine, but they were also using always this bread. But it was a very special bread, and these wizard women, it was always the women had the recipe for cooking up this stuff. It was that, and it turns out that that there's plenty of evidence now that there was like ergot fungus, which is the basis of LSD, was rampant in there, and they figured out a way to tame it so that it wasn't poisonous; it was merely psychedelic. And his thesis is that we've been here for who knows how many 100,000 years, and with this in this condition that we are now of consciousness, maybe more, maybe 200,000 years, we've had this level of consciousness as a species, and we've stumbled upon these things that make us think differently, and they're not wrong, they're right. They're teaching us what our truly magnificent beings we are, when we have that experience. And so I'm not a proponent of people running out and doing those things now. I think it's that with all the things that we've learned in the 60s is, a lot of people, went there and it was very disruptive for them. And now psychiatric profession is usually utilizing hallucinogens for very, very serious problems and meeting with tremendous success, PTSD, depression, alcoholism, substance abuse, end-of-life news, people who have the anxiety for having, end-of-life news. And so anyways, the long and the short of that part of it was that there's, this kind of consciousness that I'm speaking about. We've disregarded it these last 500 years because we think like reason is the most powerful thing we do. Well, dude, it's not. On an example, love. How reasonable is that? So we've given ourselves over to reason ever since Ignatius Loyola started up the Jesuits, and the Jesuits learned how to make both sides of every argument perfect. And then we went into this whole society where if you could make an argument that sounded at least reasonable, then that was good enough, and you could be a politician and do unreasonable stuff on reasonable premises.
You ever fancy politics?
I've thought of it. I don't know if I'm disciplined enough. It's in Canada, you have, first of all, in Canada, to be a politician, well, to be a federal politician, you need to be bilingual. Well, no, that's not true. To be a prime minister in Canada, you need to be bilingual. You need to, and it's not Irish and English.
Disappointing.
Yes, it is. My friend Jeff Proudfoot, I asked him, he's a very thoughtful guy, and I asked him if he ever thought of politics. He says, I don't know. And I said, what? And he goes, I'm not sure if I want to find out there are children I don't know about. There's a lot of responsibility in being a politician. I have some feelings about politics that I'm going to share with you because you asked the question. The worst thing we can do for young people nowadays is say to them, governments can't do anything right. If you're going to you want them to get screwed up properly, you got to leave it to the government to do it. And now the taxes. So just every time they stick their hand in their pocket, they're that's robbery. That's wrong. The constitutional democracy has created the two most powerful tools that our species have ever known for the control of the selfish wealthy. And those powers are the powers to tax and the powers to regulate. And we can seize the levers of those power and take it back from the wealthy if we want. But the measure that is the power that they fear the most is how much effort and time and money they spend trying to keep those levers of power unto themselves. And one of the things they want to do is turn us away from politics. There's all this propaganda, that comes from the fundamentalists on the right, that I call the wealth fundamentalists. They want kids to turn their backs on government because, the one guys that always show up for elections are the selfish wealthy. They always show up. That 30% always shows up and they always vote the same. And when only 30% of us show up, they win because they gerrymander, right? But if 70% of us showed up, if everybody who could vote in North America voted, there would never be another Republican government in the United States. Those guys would be there. Their thumb is on the scale of constitutional power by voter suppression, gerrymandering, all of the things that we know they do that are unfair. And if they didn't have the advantage of those selfish wealthy would no longer be in power. We're in a state now, we're just on the very cusp of it, where this could be the swan song of the selfish wealthy forever on planet Earth. All we have to do is encourage young people to seize the levers of democratic power, the powers to tax, the powers to regulate, and use them properly. Us selfish wealthy guys, no, I'm not as selfish as I used to be. Us wealthy guys whine when we talk about a 2% tax. 2% tax, what are we gonna do? Yeah, cry me a river, right? The thing they don't understand, they're trying their hardest to not understand, is that wealth is basically infinite, Pete. I've been over this with some very heavy right-wing fundamentalist, libertarian guys, and they agree with me. If we take that the 20% of the world that is privileged, like you and I, and if we took what we have, our capacity, and we develop that other 80% of the people on Earth, the human resource of all of those people, that equals productivity. Remember productivity, GDP, and all that. Product. We actually get more productive when our human resources develop. I think the world would be 5 times more wealthy if we developed the human resources of everybody else on the planet, for lots of reasons, because it's 5 times more chance for some little genius idea to come up, and then for us all to imitate it, and then it's I know I'm kind of getting rangy here, going all over the place, but I think we'll put it together before we're done. Wealthy people think that hoarding money is the smartest thing to do with it, right? But I think hoarding wealth is the wanking of wealth, the making love of wealth, right? Is being generous with it, being responsible with it. When that wanking is only, it's only useful while you're doing it, and then it's not useful anymore. Love is different. When we actually make love, we grow within ourselves. We're encouraging our partner to come back and share more. Everybody around us feels it. It's not like this, don't stay away, tell you don't keep your hands off my stash. No, it's like, oh, can I help? How can I help? Right. And, so when we hoard money, and by doing so, we prevent others from having their human resources developed, right? We're actually stifling wealth. We're not increasing it.
It's the flow of money, right? That moves the energy, that moves the possibilities, the potential, because nothing stays the same, right? Because we're traveling at, what are we traveling at, 300 and something thousand miles an hour on this little lump of rock called Earth. So there's no such thing as doing nothing. It's like
or sitting still.
Yeah, like
it's all relative.
That is all totally relative, right? And I sort of slightly revert back to this, that lady in Somalia, and there's a wonderful short story in Seth Speaks. There's a book, it's the second one by Jane Roberts, but it talks about in one life the soul, was with this homeless lady with multiple kids. And to her, the biggest dream and goal was to wake up the next morning and for her children to still be alive. And that was the most immense and beautiful feeling in the world, just for them to be alive, and it was a treat, and it was, it was amazing. So yet perspective would say that's a tragedy, but yet her perspective was to wake up the next morning for them all to still be alive, and, for them to still be together, even though homeless, as a family, was the best feeling in the world. So perspective would say, which is it, right? It's like she's fully aware and fully conscious, and so I don't know. It's
imagine how much gratitude she'd have if she had her children alive, and a nice tidy little home.
Yeah.
Imagine the gratitude that would come to us if we took this attitude to all of our brothers and sisters the world over. One of the things that is almost, you don't need to be particularly learned to know, is that when you help people, they don't bust your balls.
Well, living is giving, right? Or is it?
Giving is definitely the investment that has the highest dividend, gratitude. And that goes on for a long time. I've given like $500 to people that, just helped them with rent 2 months in a row or something like that. And, 15 years later, they, I may not even remember them, but they come and say, you saved my life.
How's that feel?
It's so profoundly rewarding. I can't push it enough. People, be generous 5 times more than you thought you were going to be, and just see what happens. See the way it makes you feel. It's well, you have to be a little bit wise. There are bums in the world. One of the arguments that people make about why not to be generous is, well, they'll just, we'll just turn them into bums. If give a guy $400 in COVID, we're just going to make him dependent and turn him into a bum. That's a very depressing view of human nature.
Mm.
The view of human nature that America and, well, actually Britain too, or, but, UK, they're, the view, the concept, the esteem that we held human nature in those days was different than now. Adam Smith, who wrote, The Wealth of Nations, it was not his, it was his second book. That was 17 years before he wrote that. He wrote the Theory of Moral Sympathy, and it was, in his book, and that's the book that he first mentioned the invisible hand in. And in his book, The Invisible Hand, was what it was about was all people are good, he said. He actually called them men, which is kind of quaint, but I'm pretty sure he meant people. All people are good. And if you set good people free to do their best, they're going to do the best that can be done for everybody, all the rest of them. And some will take advantage, but there'll be so many more of the others that, that'll make up for it. It's a very, very positive view of human nature. That was the very basis of our two political organizations, right? Now, what have we come to? You give a guy $400 for COVID and you're going to turn him into a bum. Well, that's just another one of those arguments that selfish, wealthy people make, back to the selfish, wealthy people. And they talk about, I was talking about taxation and regulation. Conservatives now, conservative used to be about, elaborating capital and protecting it and conserving it and, making it, right. And now you ask, what does conservative mean? And the guys say, well, small government, lower taxes. Smaller government and lower taxes mean exactly no regulation and no taxes, right? So all of your friends who are conservative guys who say, yeah, smaller government. Well, first of all, that's committing that same sin I said we can't do. We have to not discourage people about government. We have to encourage people about constitutional democratic government. It's the most powerful tool ever been created by our species, right? So so I'm kind of drifting around here. I'm not sure where I was going with that, but I was thinking about, the esteem with which we held in which we hold human nature has changed a lot. And the selfish, wealthy has drawn us away from Adam Smith. They misquote him and they do him a huge disservice by calling, by using Adam Smith to defend blind selfishness, because that's not what the man was speaking about. He was speaking about when a good person fulfills their own self-interest, honestly consulted, that's going to be the best you can do for everybody. And that's not about, like blind selfishness, unregulated selfishness, unmitigated selfishness. It's the selfishness of good people. And that is, when the best thing I can do for myself is to help my brother. Right? And that's a very, very profoundly positive view of human nature that began our democratic societies, our modern democratic societies. But now, these selfish, wealthy have, completely contorted all of those things. And, they want us to disregard government as being an annoyance. And really what they're saying is, don't try to regulate what I do and don't try to take any of my money. We have to we have to end the reign of the selfish, wealthy. Come with me, let's go do it.
What's your soul values, John?
You say my soul value?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I think I've been talking all around them here. Don't want to be glib about it because that's a very important question. to honor the miracle that has befallen me and all of us, to be, you know, the vessels of consciousness in the universe, and to honor it by honoring it in all of us, not just the ones of us who are lucky.
Hmm. Do you consider yourself lucky?
Yes, I'm lucky in all the ways. I can't, it's very difficult. You know, when I get COVID shots, I don't get sick. I'm lucky in all the ways. I'm lucky that I can think of these things in positive terms. These are, you know, these are, I get to dream about the future of our species, and try to encourage other people to come with me on that dream. And it's the most lucky thing that anybody ever gets to do. I'm going to tell you one of the things that, you know, talk about a drunkard's dream, you know, talk about easy as falling off a log. I hang out with a bunch of conservationists. You know, I've done a lot of work on, you know, like ecological and things, you know, climate, that. One time a person said to me, you know, how can you feel good about any of this when you look around and you see all of the damage that we're doing? You know, what is it? You know, all that, what is there to feel good about in our society? Look, the world's filled with starving people, and we're just messing it up and polluting it more. And I thought about it for a minute, and then my answer was, well, why do you think this is all so worth conserving? And they go, well, geez, what do you mean? Of course it's worth it. No, why is it worth, what do we want to conserve it for? You know, I'm asking you that. And they go, well, I mean, that's all. And I said, and then I go, it's so our future, our descendants can enjoy it too, right? Yeah, that's why they do it. So our descendants can enjoy it too. That's why we need to conserve. A good camper leaves the camp cleaner than cleaner than when they came, right? I said, well, if that's true, if it's so that our descendants can enjoy it too, we have another responsibility that you're neglecting. What's that? We have to also teach our kids to conserve it and tidy up the campsite. We also have to teach them how to enjoy it. So if we are depressed all day worrying about how terrible everything is, yes, we're conserving it, but we're not teaching our kids the most important reason for conserving it, and that is to appreciate it. So work hard all day, be as blue as you want, but at the end of the day, go out and enjoy the miracle that has befallen us. So teach your kids how to do that too. So how's that for an easy assignment? Get out there and enjoy yourselves, people, and show your kids how to do it, because that's what we're here for. We are the universe's vessels of astonishment, and you know, the only way to be astonished about this universe is to get out there and enjoy it. So,
I mean, if we all saw everything with childlike wonderment, gosh, the world would be a beautiful place. You know, there.
It should be easy for us, Pete, because, you know, we are very childlike. Just look at us. We get in squabbles and we get selfish and we get, you know, we got all these childish things. So, you know, but even younger childish eyes, I think you mean. Yes. Yeah. No, it's true. Innocence is lost to so many of us, but it can be regained. All we have to do is own our missteps. I make it sound easy, don't I?
Yeah.
All we have to do is
no pressure.
Oh, we have to.
Have you been?
I haven't always been this perfect.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, have you been this person, this connected person, this conscious being before in your life?
Well, I was in a way kind of first introduced to it consciously, you know, in those days when, you know, we were, you know, listening to, you know, Jefferson Airplane and Donovan. And, you know, that was my introduction to it. So I learned to appreciate it then. And like I say, we can appreciate these things intellectually and even kind of spiritually without completely embodying them, without completely integrating them, right? But all my life has been, trying my best to live my days in the light of this knowledge that fell in my lap. I don't know how, I wrote my book in 2016, All's Well, Where Thou Art, Earth and Why. And it's more or less the treatise of all of these things that we've been talking about here. And it's an astonishing book, just released last week in audio, with the audio book.
Yeah, excellent.
Read by the author.
Oh, like it.
But since then, it's been just right in my face. I mean, if you ever want to really challenge yourself, go out into the world and preach your ideals, right? And then, Pete, from that day on, my life has been an attempt to live up to the things I've written about. And it's a long road home, to be, to live up to the ideals that, but still first, grasp the ideals, because your life cannot, it's the easiest step to take in improving oneself, is to grasp these impossibly compelling ideals, and then don't be a hypocrite. Then you have to live up to them.
The old thing, isn't it? Do as I say, not as I do.
and stop doing those things that I do, and then stop stepping in do.
Are you where you're supposed to be, John?
I'd like to have a wider audience, only because I'd like my message to have a wider audience. I think where I'm supposed to be, I'm just doing the best I can at sort of construing this explanation of what I see us as being and where I see us going. And I'm doing the best I can at it. And, I'm not, the brightest candle in the cake, but neither am I blown out yet.
What are you capable
I will
of?
be soon. I will. Pardon me?
What are you capable of?
Oh, geez, it's miraculous. All of us, we anything that we can dream of, right? Anything that we can dream of, we have at least that much of the capability of doing it, right? And then beyond that, it's making the dream come real is often a lot of work, and people have 80% of the world will never be able to do that because their human resources haven't been developed. But we can change that, if we try hard enough. But I'm capable of writing songs. I didn't write the Ninth Symphony, but I've written some damn good songs. My mom loves them.
She bought all the albums.
My wife has every one of my albums. And but I wonder sometimes if I'm capable of describing these things you and I are talking about sufficiently well to encourage people to try it on for size too. If you want to earn your freedom, all these wonderful things that we take for granted, if we want to earn it, all we have to do really is strive to adopt this attitude that we have a responsibility to share. We have a responsibility to make sure everybody has the same things that we take for granted. And that's an easy thing to do. All you have to do is tell them to read my book.
All as well.
Because that in that book, it describes what these principles are and why they're a duty, not just a preference or something that you do if you want. We have, it's a duty for us to share our freedom, and it's a duty for us to share our wealth. Not all of it, just enough that everybody else gets the basics. Once everybody has the basics, then go ahead and get as rich as you want. It doesn't matter. For those who have a taste for it, get as rich as you want. Just pay your fair share. It's a tiny bit, 1%. If all of the wealthy people in the world paid 1% a year of everything they had, there'd be healthcare, daycare, elder care, education, medicine, all of those things that I spoke about, the things that we take for granted, they'd be available for everybody. I'm not talking about giving away money. I'm talking about giving people a leg up, preparing the institutions that will permit people to develop their own human resources. And, if we can, if we can adopt that as our long-term strategy, our long-term goal, the world's going to be a better place. And if we don't, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I don't know. It's just people helping themselves, and it's that gap between what we're capable of, what we think we're capable of. And I do find that fascinating, because even with yourself, it's, the conscious mind comes into play. I mean, our words are perfectly imperfect. They're as good as we've got. Our minds are perfectly imperfect, and that's who we are as humans. But yet we are more perfect than we can probably ever realize in 20 lifetimes, and so it's that, I don't know. I have no words for it in many ways, but I'm fascinated by our capabilities, our skills. But
they are astonishing. People say, Pete, and you've heard this, I'm sure, that we think of ourselves as special on the planet, and we think of ourselves as being above all the other beings on the planet. You think of dogs or orcas. Do you guys know? Do people in Ireland know what orcas are?
Whales?
They aren't whales actually, but they're called killer whales. They used to call them killer whales, but actually they're like a porpoise, actually a huge porpoise. But so, anyways, the reason I bring them up is they are special, and they're just as special as us in every way except one, and that is an orca cannot set my broken leg, but we can set an orca's broken fin. We can help. We can help a dog. A dog really, a dog can love us. They can, lick our face and try to wake us up when we pass out, but we can actually cure a dog. We have a capacity to help. This astonishing capability that runs rampant when we sleep, runs rampant in our dreams. That astonishing capability we've developed to the place where we can actually, we've improved our capacity to help so much just in the last 100 years. And what we should do now is actually go out there and do it. Go out and help, because it's the one magical thing that we have on all of those other creatures, is that we can actually save them. We can save them and save their environment. And that, nobody ever says it this way, but if we take good care of this planet, if we start to take good care of this planet, not only are we saving the environment for those species, we're creating the environment for infinite number of new species forever. And if we do what I'm talking about, if we do these things that we're talking about, we can make this planet Eden. And if we do it, we will have earned it. It's not something that just fell in our lap. We didn't just, so I'm lucky I'm in Eden now, eat some apples and take off our clothes. No, if we do it, if we make this place Eden, then we will have deserved it. And then we'll have something to celebrate. And in the meantime, still teach your kids how to celebrate.
I was going to say, I mean, will the human ego ever allow that to happen?
The human ego isn't as mighty as you are.
as I am.
It's not as mighty as Mighty Pete. No, the human ego is it's actually a very fragile thing. That's why it's so defensive. And it doesn't take everybody. That's one of the things I was going to get at before, and I didn't quite finish. We have a responsibility to help others, and we didn't quite finish this part of the story. But we have a responsibility. But people use as an excuse. Well, they're just going to take. They're just going to take you for the. How many people are going to take you for it? And just be bums. Maybe 10%, maybe 15% of people. But we have to grow up about that. When you help people, some people are going to just abuse it. Some people are just going to take it for granted, and take it irresponsibly, right? And not be grateful. But those people exist, but it does not absolve us of our responsibility to the 85% who wouldn't do that. My view of human nature is that if we help people, most people are going to take that help and they're going to use it to make something of themselves. Make a family for their kids, to make a life for themselves. And, we have to understand that 15% are going to be bums. So what? That doesn't take away. It's not an excuse to not help the 85%. It's just a cost of doing business, right? It's a cost of doing business. The business is helping, and some people are not going to be, particularly grateful for it. They'll just take advantage. But most people won't. Most people will be grateful for it. So we should get out there and, fulfill our duty and make sure everybody's got the basics.
It's egoic conscious perception, though, isn't it? When you give something, to give something with expectation, it's like, well, I want you to have a better life. It's like, well, is that your business? You should give without expectation, right? And as you say, you can only hope that everyone will help themselves and do the best they can, but it's also none of your responsibility either. If you've given,
but it's not an expectation, but I would say it's when we give, it's not an expectation, but it's a likely outcome. It's a likely outcome that they're going to help themselves, and it's also a likely outcome, that 15% of them are going to beat you for it. But who didn't know that?
Do you think it was? Do you reflect back? I mean, everything from you were saying you're 17 through to, coming into this wealth and then losing the wealth and all this. I mean, was that all destined to happen? Was that all supposed to happen for you to be where you are today?
Well, I'm going to say it's hard for me to believe. It's as hard for me to believe that had to happen as it is for me to believe that it actually happened. But it did. And I've been speaking with you here about what I thought the implications of that were. And for me, they were to demonstrate I've demonstrated two things with my wealth. One of them is how to be good with money, and the other one is how to be really stupid with it. that's the other book I've got, Good with Money. Said it's a rich guy's guide to gaining everything by losing it all. And some portion of what I parted with, I gave to people who didn't deserve it at all. Just people who were not thoughtful. And but anyways, I'm glad it came to me. My responsibility that it came to me was to learn to learn how to be wealthy appropriately, and then help other people to encourage other people to adopt that view. I guess that's sort of the way I think about it. If the universe had a purpose for me, I don't know if that was it, but that purpose lies there for us all to take up if we want, right? what our purpose on, I think besides being the universe's vessels of consciousness, astonishment, and love, I think those are our purpose. What we're going to actually do with it day to day, that's up to us. It's our choice. Mm-hmm. How are we going to express those things? But, the first step is obviously to, find out what's the hell there is to be astonished about, and then get astonished and then do something about it, then do something, go out and share it, right? And then we can love ourselves. You sleep a lot better, Pete, when you're not worried about people coming to take your money.
That's mad, isn't it? With mature reflection, would you do things differently, or would you change anything?
Yeah, I think with mature reflection, first of all, I wouldn't have gone back to the United States and got busted. I don't know if that's necessarily mature reflection, but it's reflection. But I think, yes, I think I would have been more. There was a time when it seemed like the money was endless for me. It was actually boundless, but for the fact that we all got arrested and the market value of the stock went from £6 to 60 pence. If I had an opportunity to do it again, I would have twice as much money for people who deserved it, because I wouldn't have given away so much to people who didn't.
It's amazing, isn't it? How do you decide who deserves it and who doesn't? I mean, is there a metric there, or how do you make that call?
Well, I think we all have this capacity to make judgments, and I know like being judgmental isn't what I'm talking about, but we do make proper judgments, and we have the capacity. One of the things I did notice that is a kind of a hallmark touchstone is that, and this might seem surprising to some people, but the people who turned out that I'm most happy that I shared with are the ones who resisted, the ones who said, no, I can do this on my own. There are other people who need it more than me. You don't have to do that. I can look at it. I'm very, please not. No, I can't accept that. I can look after myself. And then I've become quite adept now at talking people beyond that, by saying things like, if I don't give away enough of it, I don't deserve any of it. And, there are lots of people in the world that don't have the same graciousness towards their children that you have, or the same concern about, their place in the community that you have. And those things, I'd like to honor them. And, I've been very, very fortunate. And, I'd like to, it's part of what my obligation is now, is to help pass it around. And so, and if you ever get in a position where you can pass some along to somebody else, please do. Right. And by then, they're almost ready to say, okay. But that's one of the metrics, is the people who are really deserving are often resistant to accepting.
Why?
So, it's a pride thing, maybe a little bit. And I wouldn't say, there are much worse misplaced prides than that, but that's we grow up in our society about this. We have there's an ethos about, looking after yourself. But, when you have children with a guy who's an asshole, and, he takes off and doesn't give you any support, you're entitled to some good luck. You can, it's okay. You can take this, do good with it. Teach your kids to be generous. And then you'll be paying me back. If you teach your kids to be generous, then you'll be paying me back.
Are people generally good at helping themselves?
Yeah, I would say eventually. We do make mistakes along the way. money management is actually, it takes a certain kind of adeptness, right? Like, you know, you can think something's really, really smart because it's, boy, that house is so beautiful. Wouldn't that be nice to raise my kids in? And then you buy it and it's got worms and mold and all of a sudden you don't have enough money. You know, we make, you know, so, but generally speaking, I think in terms of like the spirit that moves people, I think generally, you know, people are pretty well equipped to look after themselves. You know, if they aren't, they're ready to learn some lessons. Right. And then, you know, you make some mistakes and you know, you get up and you brush yourself off and you keep on going. Right. Sometimes people, you know, that I've utterly resisted receiving any gifts from me have called me back in a couple of years and said, you know, how grateful they are, but I've just got this one last problem. I said, I'm so happy you asked. I'm so grateful you asked. I'd be pleased to help. Right. And then, and when that happens, it's really lovely because it takes a lot of the weight out of it. You know, people begin to understand that, you know, I gave a bunch of people mortgages to buy houses that a bank would never ever lend the money to. And you know, 2/3 of those, or 1/3 of those, I would say wound up in what the bank would call default. I've just forgiven them, you know, and then they wind up having their house for free. Or not for free, but for free to that extent. Yeah. And you know, it's when I, you know, my impression of Jesus of Nazareth is that he was a kind of guy who was, he's walking down the street and there was, you know, call him a bum on the corner, looking for, you know, a so-called sandwich. I think Jesus would have sat down with him and gave him a couple of bucks and said, "How you doing, man? You know, what's up? You know, you're looking a little bit dirty under the fingernails there. You're looking after yourself." You know, stuff like that. Do you know who Glennon Doyle? You know who she is? Glennon's she's an American lady, and she's married to I can't remember her name, but she was a big shot on the American women's soccer with the, you know, that short haircut and stuff. And Glennon fell in love with her and they're partners now. But she made this wonderful, Glennon had this wonderful thing she said on one of her podcasts, said, Jesus was a guy that went out and he sought out, let me get this straight, he sought out the people that religion rejected and that power oppressed. And he went to live with them and heal them. So if you want to call yourself a Christian, do that. And, you know, and if you give the guy a buck and he goes and spends it on some, you know, heroin, give him $10 and he spends it on some, you know, what's that new kind of heroin everybody uses? The one that's, well, it's that, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. There's a drug now that everybody's dying from. I think Jesus would say, you know what? Have one more day of enjoyment. Here you go. He wouldn't be judgmental. He wouldn't be saying, oh, you're just going to spend it on, you know, amphetamines. You know, we should just give those guys the $2 and shut up. You know, we're lucky they're not, you know, you're not, you know, you're not going to make them a worse addict by giving them $2. You're just going to make their one day a little bit easier. And that's okay. You know, that's a nice thing to do. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with helping somebody, you know, get drunk one more time before he hits bottom. I would encourage it, but it's not, you know, there's no dividend in being mean to them. Yeah.
Well, it's that giving with, you know, it's giving with judgment. You say I'll not give you too much because you'll do this and you'll do that, or you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. It's like, well, It's none of your business what they do.
It is your money. What you do with your money is your business, right? So
yeah,
but you're right that it takes a certain kind of it takes a certain lack of taste to impress those kinds of obligations on the money that you give. It's not really giving anymore, is it? It's something other than giving. It's it's and it's whatever. I mean, it's I don't it's just not the best.
yeah,
but the best is to be to just really to be motivated by helping that poor guy, that poor lady, whatever, have kind of a better day or two.
It is that, yeah. It's that if you can't give gracefully and freely, then don't give at all.
Yeah, I don't want to go that far though, because okay, you can give well, or you can give like an asshole, whatever. Go ahead, but just give.
Be a good giver.
Be a good giver. Yeah.
What's your non-negotiables?
I wish I could say I was that disciplined. I try my hardest to not be selfish, and I don't want to participate in unkindness. I'd like to, I don't think here, just how's this for an exact current example. I don't think that being anti-vax is non-negotiable. Right? First of all, it's misinformed, and second of all, it's not a proper sense of community, right? For the small risk we take getting the jab, it's a huge benefit to the community. And so there's some things that are non-negotiable, and I think that public health is one of them. But we have to measure all of these things with whatever tools are available to us. And I think I'd be a hypocrite if I said being cruel was a non-negotiable, because I've been cruel to people, right? I don't do it much anymore, I don't think, or at least not knowingly. I don't, being pro-Trump is non-negotiable. I can understand some people wanting to do that, but I'm not one of them. And I'm going to remain wide open with my, thoughts about it. If anybody asks me, I'm going to be very generous with my thoughts about that if anybody asks me, but I'm not. So when you ask about non-negotiables, I'm, participating in racism, participating in misogyny, patriarchy, although, but I am probably patriarchal in some ways still. I'm surprised. I'm surprised by these things all the time. They sneak up on us. I read something last week that was astonishing. It was this person talking about Vikings landing in Newfoundland in 1040 or something, right? And they said, they had all this beautiful science about how the axe blade and the market left in the tree, and you could, I guess it's carbon dating or something like that. I'm not sure. And then at the end of this beautiful thing about science, he says that the expansion of humanity into the unoccupied world was 400 years sooner than anybody thought. And I'm going, I got friends from the Great Haida Nation. They've been here for 14,000 years. And I said, tell it to the Haida, how could somebody make such an idiotic, so anyways, I still do stuff like that, right? I mean, my wife Hillary is very into, being thoughtful, not being judgmental about certain things, like, for instance, people are concerned about their weight and Hillary's completely against that now. Said you'd never ever make any remarks about weight. First of all, it's all bullshit. Somebody's not healthy because they're big. The only thing they are because they're big is different than the ones that are on the magazine cover. You know, they're different. They're different than the ones that, you know, those men take their magazines out behind them. Oh, no, they're, and so, you know, where I'm going with that is, you know, I look at people and sometimes think things. So I catch myself, you know, when I see a colored person, sometimes I think, oh, the poor guy's been, you know, I wonder what it's like for them, you know, but that's making a whole bunch of assumptions about them. They're just, you know, and I grew up in a society where that was day-to-day stuff, you know. In the 60s, you know, there was, you know, the civil rights movement and all of that was going on and stuff, but people were just subconsciously, or even consciously, but subconsciously racist about all kinds of things, you see. So it's hard, you know, it's hard for me to say that, you know, I have non-negotiables, because I surprise myself all the time with the, you know, corrupt ideas that still lurk within me.
Errors to be human, right? You know.
Yeah, I'm open to correction.